All righty. So we're going to get started in like 1 minute, just so that we can give people a chance to get in here. Thank you for being on time. We appreciate you. And we appreciate you coming to join us at all. It's great to see your lovely faces. So as you'll see in the chat, Kim and I believe Katie are going to be monitoring our chat. So thank you, ladies, for doing that. If you have questions or if you have some concerns or something you would like to add to the conversation, you can go ahead and put it in the chat room. Both Kim and Katie will be monitoring what's going on in the chat, and they will be answering questions or connecting with you or agreeing with you or giving you some kind of feedback in there. So feel free to put your responses in that space. We do have all of the members of the leadership team, the PD leadership team on here today who will be facilitating in some way and assisting. And at the end of the slideshow presentation, you'll see who those people are if you need to reach out to any of us, the equity specialists or the PD leadership team, to continue to support you through this work. There is a bit.ly. It's called bit.ly DRT March 30. I think somebody put it into the chat, or you can just go to it on your own. And Kim, can you just tell them about the split screen? Kim, are you able to share about split screen or no? You want me to unmute you?
Sorry, I was doing a couple of things. Can you repeat your question?
I was asking if anybody didn't know how to do split screen, if you could give them a quick like.
Oh, I would love to give that little tidbit. Okay, in order to split your screen with another, like so you could have the slide deck that you can operate on one side and the Zoom screen on another side. First of all, I've learned the Zoom, you have to get it out of full screen. And then when you're in that window, if you hold the Windows key on your keyboard, which is between Control and Alt, down, and then you use your left and right arrows to choose which side of the screen you want that to be on. Once you press it, then you'll get a half screen of that, and then you can click on your desktop with your other windows, and you can use the windows and the opposite arrow, and you'll get it to go onto the other half of the screen, and you can operate them independently. Your chat box, however, will go over top one or the other, but you can move it around as you need to see what you need to see.
And if you guys go to the reaction button, can you guys give me a thumbs up or something on your reaction so I know you have your reaction button working? I added some more options to your reactions. Oh, no, guess not. They're not there. I tried to. Cool. Just give me a thumbs up or one of the reactions so I know you're there. And just like, kind of like, I remember like, you know, in church, the pastor gets super motivated when you amen them. So I just want to like remind you that the more you give reaction is the more excited the facilitators will be. So just use your buttons, keep them motivated. If you hear something that resonates with you, go ahead and give them a thumbs up. Everybody can see it. If you have something you want to cheer for, give them a clap or a high five virtually, 6 feet distance. All right. Are we ready to roll? Awesome. Now that I got all the logistics out of the way. Leadership team, did I forget anything as far as logistics before we get going? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so it looks like we have 26 people on at this point. We're going to be continuing our conversation. This is like the extra to kind of community outreach and relationship just from our DRT meeting from last week. So if you are a DRT, you are not required to share this with your staff, but if there's something that you feel is important that you would like to share with your staff, please feel free to do so. If there's anything that you want more feedback, questions, or anything about it, please reach out to us and we'll help you. But this is really just like an add-on. This is not like part of the regular DRT meetings. All right, can we go forward?
There we go. So let's just review our virtual norms. They're mostly the same as last time with just a slight adjustment. Do type your questions or comments in using the chat feature, and keep your default mute on unless a facilitator calls on you. They may do that for individual dialogue, but largely we'll keep that mute on and talk using the chat feature. As Ayana mentioned, we do have 2 chat dedicated facilitators looking at those comments, maybe calling on people. There they are, Kim and Katie, waving at you. There you go. And we'll take up further attention as it's required. Do be aware that we're recording, and also, as Ayana mentioned, that you can choose to record this in part or whole. If you go to the bottom of your screen, you should see a circular record button, and that'll record a video local to your desktop.
So we have a quote that we wanted to share with you all to kind of get us kick-started, and I'm just going to read it, follow along with me. Division to apply an equity lens and consider the impacts on underserved groups, including students of color, students with disabilities, emerging bilingual students, students experiencing poverty and homelessness, and students who belong to other protected classes. Consider whether the model will improve or worsen disparities between populations. Consider barriers to equitable implementation and unintended consequences. So today, a lot of our learning and conversation is going to revolve around that bolded sentence, which says, consider whether the model will improve or worsen disparities between populations.
All right, my favorite part, and yours too. Here we are at the 3 characteristics, just to refresh our memories. Let's do that. Repeat after me. I say 1, you say lenses. 1. 1. Beautiful. I say 2, you say instruction. 2. 2. I say 3, you show a partnership. 3. 3. And as you can see from this slide, today we're going to focus on instruction, 2, instruction, and 3, partnership. And hopefully by the end, we'll have delved into both.
Okay, so as we have presence before, and you may well know from being a DRT and being a member of our community, then when we talk about that partnership, we're talking about an academic alliance. So this slide on the left reminds us of some of those qualities of an academic ally that Zaretta Hammond presences in chapter 5 and 6 of CRT in the Brain. Take a moment right now to read through that list, and I'm curious, in the chat there, name the one that you feel like is most important right now. I see a couple: recognize and validate and reserve blames, right? Believing in students' ability to succeed, sure. Checking in around student confidence, right? So helping students develop academic goals. Good. So importantly, take a trip back to chapters 5 and 6 of the Hammond text to remind yourself of what those qualities of an ally were. As a leadership team, we discussed what we thought some of the important qualities of an ally were during this time, and we pulled out a couple that we wanted to presence with you today. One of them was to recognize and validate socio-political context. So recognize and validate the variety of situations that students are in and that they're going through, and how the socio-political context impacts them uniquely. There are some nice resources there if you have some space and you want to do some further digging around socio-political context for groups of our students. That first one there, incidentally, says, how are your API, that's Asian Pacific Islander students. The second one that we wanted to presence was believing in students' ability to succeed. I saw somebody point that one out as well. And there are a couple of resources there linking to the cultural assets of your students. So this is meant to be a space for you to explore further, or if you do choose to share with your peers, for your peers to explore further around how they can create that academic alliance, how they can be an academic ally. Lei, will you move us on there? So at the center of being an academic ally, of course, is that academic focus. We know that that relationship for being an academic ally means combining trust with this academic focus in order to increase cognitive growth, in order to increase the learning and growth of our students. And this week in our school communities, our administrators have been leading us to define what this virtual learning is going to look like when it resumes after spring break. So we know that we should be getting our minds set to the assumption that after spring break, we will be introducing new material. We will be looking to confirm student learning and growth. And so that really invites us to consider characteristic 2, and particularly characteristic 2.4. Characteristic 2.4 asks us to think about the variety of ways that we assess learning. And so think about after spring break, as we are introducing new material, how is it that we'll invite students to choose the way that they show what they know, use multiple approaches to assess learning, encourage divergent responses, make sure that we're keeping an eye on conceptual understanding rather than the language that they're using, the specific academic language. And of course, how is it that we're checking in frequently to confirm learning and growth for all students? It's also important, as we keep that academic focus at the center of our attention, that we begin thinking about how we check in and how we get feedback about the academic goals that we're setting with students and families, particularly if we're not hearing from students. Lei, would you move us on to the next slide? So up to the time that we went into school closure, we spent a lot of our DRT bandwidth talking about equity audits. And this was a nice, I thought, example of a CRT micro-credential candidate this year. This candidate shared the way in which they were using an equity audit approach to confirm learning in their classes. So they said, I've created a log for each of my classes. Who have I individually contacted other than blanket emails, right? Who has responded? Who has participated in the optional virtual Padlet share? Who is commenting on their classmates' Padlet responses? And it's allowed me to see where my gaps are very clearly at this point, which gives me a starting point to see who I need to reach out to in a different way, whether that's moving to phone calls, etc. What I liked about this was that it took a systematic, what I call like an equity audit approach to identify gaps, not just on who had contact, but also who was interacting with the learning. And I think that this is a nice example of a creative way that we can begin to think about how we look for gaps in our feedback and how we look for gaps in our assessment of what students are learning and how they're growing.
So again, when we're talking about feedback, a quick reminder, this is something you guys have already been doing. It's something that we want to re-emphasize is a part of being responsive. As we become more responsive in our instruction to students and their families at this point, that can only be based out of feedback. So what we've included here on this slide are just some stems, some ideas of questions that would help you to further probe students' feelings of success, or students when they encounter obstacles, or even the last question, which we would say is something you should consider for all students and families, which is what supports do they need from you to continue moving forward? So again, these apply to students that are participating, but also students that might not be participating. If a student isn't engaged, if a family isn't engaging, when you take that time to notice those things, taking time to contact them in a way that seems fit based on what you've noticed, and saying, how can I collect feedback that will help me drive my instruction and will help me continue the partnership that I already have?
Okay, so now we're going to go into our breakout rooms. We've had some practice with this, I know, at our last DRT meeting. So Ayana, who is our fearless Zoom leader, is going to be working on getting our breakout group started. So we're going to take a minute to consider the question that you see in the box below. So in our breakout room, how will you collect feedback from families and students in this time and shift your instruction accordingly? Just a few norms for the groups. Remember that the rooms will close in about 60 seconds. And at the end of the groups, we want to make sure that we capture your reflections and your responses. And so what will happen is the facilitator in your group is going to come back to the large group, and we're going to discuss what took place in our small group breakouts. So I'm going to check in with Ayana. You all set? Okay. So she's still working on that. Looks like we had a question. Maybe we can take a question while Ayana is getting us all broken up into our groups.
I'll take a moment to address a question from Jeff Handler here. So Jeff, I thought brought up like a really important point, and it speaks to a pattern that I've been noticing in some of my conversations. We know that, and Jeff, if I'm misinterpreting this question, please unmute yourself and help me pivot a little bit. But I've noticed that as we talk to teachers about getting back to the learning, that teachers who are still aware of families who need support of one type or another that is non-academic, that is like how to access food or technology or whatever those non-academic concerns are, that it's hard to get mentally back to this space of focusing on the learning targets. And so at the end of this presentation, we'll share a couple of compiled lists of the supports that are out there, supports identified through Albemarle County Public Schools, but also other support lists in the community, so that you can navigate some of those with families. Jeff, I see you get your hand there and you want to talk about that. Yeah. Yeah, sure.
What I meant, because for me, I was speaking more of the families we live with. Because we already have at ours, for the way we covered that at Kale, is we now have a family support team member as assigned to every PLC. So I feel like when we talk about our families, we now have a chain of command that I feel like those needs are covered. We have those needs. It's figuring out the balance of all of this, and then I'm homeschooling a kindergartner and a third grader. Like that, it's just reality of fitting it all in and making a system that works so that I'm not sacrificing that, which is what it feels like I'm doing. Yeah.
right.
Exactly.
I feel you. Let somebody else want to take that question before we get the breakout into the breakout rooms.
So Rebecca has added something to the chat about the choice theory group that she's part of. working on a presentation to talk about this very thing. Rebecca, do you want to unmute and give us a little glimpse into that work?
Sure. So I don't know if the presentation is quite published yet. My mom is actually one of the ones on the choice theory, like on the board doing some of the recording of these. But if you're familiar with choice theory at all, it's about talking about your basic needs and then also thinking about your students' basic needs and your own maybe family's basic needs, and sort of how do you balance now that you are the teacher and the parent. And that goes for like us as individuals, but then also talking to the families that we work with, thinking like they aren't necessarily teachers and now they are the teacher sort of at home as well as the parent, and how to play both roles. So I can look up where that is available and share the link with you guys.
That's awesome, Becca. And if you share that out, we'll put it in a follow-up communication.
Okay.
Thank you. Hey, Anna, do you have the rooms set up now?
Yeah. So we're all set and ready to go. Thank you guys so much for sharing. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hope you're having a great day. The weather's been beautiful.
Oh my gosh, isn't it?
Yes. All right. So, if you don't mind, we'll go ahead and get started because we're definitely excited to hear what you've been doing while we've been away. So, just to reiterate the question was, how will you collect feedback from students and families in this time and shift your instruction accordingly? So, if you could just let us know maybe what school you teach and your focus grade areas, so that way we can kind of have a concept of where you're starting.
I can start. I'm Jenna, and I'm at Murray High School and Community Middle. And I work like a quarter of the time with the middle schoolers and the rest of the time as a science teacher at the high school.
Beautiful.
So I think that for right now, the feedback that I've been getting has just been from the communications that I've been having with parents and students. And I've been doing that through emails and text messages. But I think that moving forward, now that we have like more of this plan for having to do instruction starting after spring break, that it'll be interesting to hear what kind of feedback we get. And then with that feedback, sort of change the way that we're doing our instruction. So for right now, I don't really have any like feedback on instruction, just feedback on like how things are going, I guess.
I'm Megan Panic. I am at K-Tech. I am actually the instructional coach at K-Tech. So I can say that what most of the instructors have been doing so far is the same thing, kind of gathering information based on feedback from communications. And we are just starting to try to make it a little bit more formal now, where the students that we really can't seem to reach, we are referring to our student support committee, who is going to try to dig a little bit deeper and find out what's going on, see if they can contact somebody. Because it is luckily a minority of our students, but we do have a small population right now that is just not responding to our communications.
I'm Becca. I'm at Walton Middle School. Right now, the 6th grade team had a lot of ideas to send out, and we got kind of told to hold the phone on that, that we were moving too quickly. So right now, we're just communicating with our advisory classes, which has actually been kind of difficult for me because I have the urge to like reach out to all of my students, but we're asked to sort of, follow a system and make sure that everybody is reaching out to their advisory. So I've been doing that on emails and phone calls and texts. Today, some kids asked if we could Skype, so setting up that. One thing that the 6th grade team would like to do, sort of moving into the academic focus, is asking families like, how hands-on do you want us to be and how hands-off do you want us to be? Because we know that so much learning is already happening at home. So sort of trying to take that viewpoint of like, how can we enhance what's already happening at home, or who needs more help and who doesn't need as much help. So looking to get that feedback when we're kind of allowed to move into that.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. So I'm Lanika, and I teach high school biology and animal studies at Albemarle High School. And so the feedback we've been collecting is very similar to what I've heard you all express. For us, our 2A teachers were assigned their connect and check. So they are responsible technically for contacting all the students in their 2A classes. For me, I don't have a 2A class. I have planning during that time. So what our school has asked us to do is, for those of us that don't have students during 2A, we've been asked to look at a list of students who don't have a 2A class as well, and to select students from that list to reach out to as well. And one of the great things that I found out about that list was I'm a part, it's great when students love on you enough to add you to a group that they have. So there are several students on that list that I've been a part of a group me text and chat with. And so I've been able to stay in touch with them that way as well. But the feedback has definitely looked different, as you were sharing, as it did when we were physically in the building. Because I feel like at this point, a lot of it has to do with that triangle. So where a lot of, sometimes our parents in high school may not be as involved in day-to-day communications as we are with our students. Now it's almost like, we talked about this a little bit earlier, how to kind of shift some of our family structures, including my own, from the dependent to independent. So they kind of, parents too rely on grades, I've noticed. And so their feedback is maybe, well, is my child going to get a passing grade? Not necessarily how the continuation of learning is going to be. So that's been an interesting conversation in terms of feedback for me.
The idea of going to only pass-fail classes is a very scary thing for a lot of people, especially parents right now, which is interesting because really we're trying to focus on the learning, but that's not how they always, that's not what they're interested in always. They're oftentimes more, and not oftentimes, but sometimes more interested in the grade. So that's actually what we're getting ready to, at K-Tech after we come back from break, put together for my staff is, when you move to a pass-fail and when you move online, your feedback becomes so important to the students. What they're doing well, what they need to work on, how they can work on what they need to work on. All of that feedback becomes key because that's what you spend most of the time doing, is providing feedback.
Just going back to the question too, do you think that this kind of displacement and closing of the buildings is going to naturally going to be guide us into more of the culture responsive teaching and equitable teaching and grading practices feedback model that has been talked about around the county so far?
I also wonder, I wonder whether it's going to, sorry.
No, you're
I wonder
good.
whether it's going to encourage some people to do more flipped learning too. Now that they become more comfortable with some of these tools really fast, maybe they'll actually want to use them next year.
It'll also be interesting to see how students respond to this. I know I've gotten a lot of emails from students being like, when are you gonna make videos for us to do, you know, the rest of the year's content and things like that. I'm like, okay, I hear what you're asking. And just sort of, I get feedback when I've done video notes in class. Some students really love it and some students really hate it. So it'll be interesting to see what their take of this is, and then how teachers are responsive to what they like and don't like about this situation.
I think that one of the kind of cool things that has come of this is just sending emails to my students that are not about academics at all, and just learning about the different things that they're doing, and even being able to share that what I'm doing. Like, you know, what are they watching on Netflix? I did a hip hop dance class. Like, this was really cool. So I think that that has been, it's created even more of an opportunity to get to know our students more so, I think.
I definitely think that, as Laura said before, when you really start to open up your mind about what an assessment can be, and how all the different ways that we can assess learning, which we're being forced to do right now, that I think could be really powerful in, you know, forwarding the conversation around grading that's going to have to happen next year in Albemarle County.
And I know we have about 5 more minutes, and I just kind of want to get your feedback too. If you think about how your instruction, you know, and your family connections, your alliances looked prior to buildings closed, what specific, can you share like one example of a shift in your practices that you're going to maybe foresee in the next 6 weeks or so? So for example, if you weren't using the online tools, maybe like Seesaw or Schoology quite as much, how do you see yourself shifting your time as it applies to instruction and building those academic alliances and relationships moving forward?
I guess thinking one thing that just setting up today, because since the instruction piece is on less of a schedule on the student side, there's more time for the connection piece, whether that be personal or academics. So having just set up office hours can allow so much to happen within that time, and not only during office hours, but, you know, I've been sort of thinking about how do I still do cooperative learning while it feels so independent from like me pushing something out, but I want to bring students together. And like one idea was having them, I did a gamified unit, so continuing their like crew setup, and that would be who would be on their Zoom call, and we could do a cooperative thing still together in a smaller group. So just sort of like, I guess I'm more excited about that piece of having time and to be creative with them, and that the constraints of the school day don't necessarily allow.
I think one of the things that I'm excited about now that we have more time is doing like a flipped classroom thing and recording some like lectures that I would otherwise be giving in class. And I love this idea because the kids can continue to come back to it and watch it and, you know, learn something that they missed the first time. And yeah, I've just never had time to do that before. I haven't really prioritized it. And I think that's something that I'm going to be trying moving forward.
I think a lot of our instructors are exactly that. They're going to be really embracing more of the flipped model, and the best practices that go along with that. I think for me, I mean, I'm an instructional coach this year, but in the past I've always been an English teacher, and not having the SOLs and breathing down your neck in May is amazing, because it's like, oh, that opens up your whole month of May to do some really cool, exciting, creative things that, you know, in the past it would be like test prep and testing pretty much the whole month of May. So that's an amazing opportunity, and I really hope teachers are taking advantage of that.
I was just wondering, Leilani, did you want to share anything?
Hi, folks. I'm on 2 different Zoom calls at once. I'm administering from the regular room, and then I'm in this breakout room at once at the same time. So I just want to let you know the things that I heard you all talking about were really amazing. Really interested in how people are going to assess learning right now. Really interested in seeing all of the creativity and design curriculum design that's going to happen. I think that this is going to push us to new levels to connect with our communities and our students. So it's really exciting opportunity for us. And I just want to say, like, as a parent, and I'm listening to you, and I don't know if you guys I witnessed teenagers or kids right now, but my boys are really excited about learning online, and they want to, and they're excited about the opportunity. So we've seen already some really creative teachers coming up with awesome stuff already. Even if they shouldn't have yet, Becca. But it's been like a lifesaver for them to come through with those things. So I just want to commend all of you for your hard work, and I know we're going to have some really great lessons that are going to thrill kids and get them off of the internet for recreation and onto the internet for learning. So I'm excited. Thanks, guys.
Welcome back, everybody. So as people are coming in, we will be having your facilitators share out a little bit about what was going on in your breakout rooms. All right, we're almost there. Everybody will be here in 1 second. Fabulous. Okay, Lanika has to go, so we're going to mix up the order a little bit, guys. We're going to start with Lanika with her breakout session. She was she was supposed to go second, so then we'll pick up with the order as we were supposed to do originally. That's for the facilitators. All right, Lanika, what happened in your room?
Hi, everybody. Sorry I have to skedaddle, but I have another meeting to go to. But one of the things that I think I wanted to share with everybody that was great from our group was just hearing about the excitement of having time to actually develop and utilize some of these best practices that we've been talking about and we hear so much about during the school year. For example, like utilizing flipped classrooms, and also making sure that we have time now, which is great, to video record, for example, like a lesson that's being presented and having students being able to access that at any time. So it's not like when they leave our classroom now, they necessarily have to leave the material and the content and the conversations that we may be having with them. They have the ability now to, for example, record a Zoom and hear that dialogue and receive that content and that camaraderie and collaborative effort from this point on. So that was one of the things, the key things that I took away from our conversation today. And Leilani shared, and so the group, we're just excited about what's going to come from teachers and parents and families and communities as we move forward.
Thank you, Lanika.
Bye, everybody. Have a great
Bye,
afternoon.
thank you. Okay, so the order is going to get a little bit mixed up, so I'm going to call on each facilitator to share, okay? Kim, you're up.
Okay, so our group had about 3 really key points that I'm kind of distilling it down to. We had a great discussion, but one thing that we focused on was that they, when they were communicating with parents, they were finding that family time was really being appreciated, to echo Lanika. And so the point that we went to was to be mindful of that and use that as feedback to not create busy work, but to leverage that and look at that wealth and that that benefit of that time whether it's the 4 or 5-year-olds that need to sit next to parents to learn alphabets, to trying to connect siblings at the other levels. We all had Southern feeder pattern people, so we were trying to see connections about connecting siblings from different levels to potentially help the littles and that sort of thing. So, but just honoring family time and not taking it away with busy work going forward was a big idea, and just seeing opportunity in this for a lot of cultural work, and for teachers to be able to collaborate to share that information with each other so that we grow in our knowledge of our students and really kind of get the top blown off of the amazing wealth that we have in our families. And we got very excited about that, and just wanted to really focus on that.
Thank you. Marion?
Hi. So we talked about one, being okay with like sitting in that discomfort. We talked about that for a little while, and using that knowledge to help us be more bridges to students in terms of not just thinking about the academic feedback, but also thinking about emotional feedback from students in terms of one of the best things I heard was one of the people in my group was a counselor, and him talking about the things that he hears and the things that students and families have shared and opened up really has, I mean, for me at least, opened my eyes to the things that someone who is a supporting person or a person that sees students outside of the academic setting can bring, and remembering that they bring that fullness to our academic work, and that they bring that support to the work that we're doing.
Thank you. Katie?
Great. Two things that really stood out to me in our group were that the teachers, the educators were really listening to feedback from families and collecting it in a variety of ways, being mindful not to overwhelm families with thousands of different ways to communicate, but really listening to families to see if texting or calling or the Seesaw app or other platforms meet their needs the best, and going from there. And to honor that some families are feeling overwhelmed, and to really provide support where we can through the streamlined modalities of their choice. We also talked a lot about that initial question of whether or how we can manipulate within our locus of control this new platform of education so that the disparities aren't increased. A lot of people spoke to concerns about internet access, or how can we meet the needs of all of our diverse learners with this very new to us, new to them educational model, and really trying to figure out what is our way of moving forward and what's within our control, and going back to feedback and what we hear from families as a way to guide us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Lars?
Sure. I'll start by presencing with the group 2 concerns which were raised, which I want to make sure I bring back to leadership, but I think that maybe we can all presence in our communities if it's appropriate. And that is first, it's really on 2 sides. One, for secondary educators. I've heard this in a couple of secondary schools, and I don't know if it's universally true, but because of the large number of students and families that you serve in secondary education, administrators in many cases divided up the whole school among the teachers that were in the building, and so everybody's reaching out to confirm contact with a set group of families, and then that leaves us in a position now where we have to pivot and figure out how to reestablish our contact with our own students. And so I think that that's a significant thing that we need to navigate at the secondary level, and it's important for us to think through that with administrators. I hope the administrators are thinking through that now, so that we can get back to the academics after we've kind of ensured that we have contact with everybody. The second one was at the preschool level. That we need to make sure that we're including preschool teachers and preschool families in this conversation, and especially giving them access to the same tools that we're using, so that they get the critical start to their education career that we're hoping to get them when we provide that. We have a really nice example from one of our participants about taking this time thus far to reach out and make sure, much as Katie just said, that they've established the ways to be in communication. So for whom is email connectivity, for whom is text connectivity the best? This teacher established Google Classroom with all of the students and families, and then began to experiment with the different platforms to see which platforms students and families engaged with. Began Zooming with the class to get that feedback that we're talking about, and began to shift on that academic focus. That teacher described their approach as hustling, which I think is both useful to hear and also describes the challenge, right? And one of our participants mentioned the importance of naming the shift now, especially as we're moving to an academic focus. As we're going to begin to talk more and more about learning, we need to presence that both for ourselves and for our PLCs, but also with families. Let them know, signal to them that we are making the shift to learning now.
Awesome. Thank you, Lars. Destiny?
I think that my group kind of had a similar conversation to Lars. There's the way that we look for, receive, and give feedback is definitely shifting. And so we kind of talked about the way that we've been able to receive feedback from families currently and what we might anticipate that will look like as we shift to more of an academic focus after spring break. I think that it was really interesting because when we were talking about what ways we might get feedback, we weren't quite ready to think about that as we're kind of like in the first day of thinking about what we want our instruction to look like. But it is kind of cool to have that in the back of our mind as we do plan to make sure that the work is meaningful. A check could be, how do we intend to get feedback or give it? And it might be kind of like a good engagement check. If we can't think of an authentic way to give feedback, maybe that's not the best material or thing to give to students at that moment.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, Destiny. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Did you guys enjoy your breakout sessions? I like using them. They make it feel like we're not all 25 of us on Zoom and nobody has a voice. Yeah, I agree. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate your participation. Okay, so speaking of feedback, we would like your feedback. So I did put into the chat the feedback form for you guys to go ahead and fill out. It's similar questions to what you just saw. It just helps us to be able to know as we're going towards April, what it is we're going to be thinking about planning for as a leadership team to best support our community. Also, we will be shifting back to our once a month meeting, so it will be the same date as your April meeting is still going to be the same date for you. If you're a DRT, it's the same DRT meeting date in April. It will be virtual, as you know. So we just want to be able to get your feedback and be able to help us moving forward, because there's so many fresh new waters to navigate and so much information that we want to share with you to support you as we're going through this. We actually have a hard time narrowing it down into small enough pieces that we don't want to just share everything. So whatever you think is like the most important thing for you, we need to know that so that we can really focus our planning around that. Because we could talk about lots and lots of things, but we want to make sure we're talking about what you need us to talk about. So I'm going to give you like 2 minutes to go ahead and finish filling that out. If you haven't clicked on the link to do that, you can go ahead and do that now. And if you guys don't mind multitasking, we're teachers, we're good at that. We just want you to know that we know that being an ally as an educator always means more than just academics. Because just as much as you are invested in your students' learning, you're also invested in making sure that they're okay. So on the next slide, you're going to see some resources that have been put out for the community, whether that's the one that the Albemarle County Public Schools website put out. There's one Charlottesville City Schools has out, well, not schools, just Charlottesville City, and Albemarle County. all having to do with like internet, paying their rent, where to get food, what to do in an emergency, who do they call if they need something. So if your families are having questions and you're feeling like you really don't have that answer, we wanted to make sure that you knew where to go to get those answers and how to be able to best support your families, not just academically, but if somebody comes up with something that's a little bit out of your wheelhouse, at least you have a resource for that. And finally, of course, we are always grateful and happy to have you guys with us. So if you need anything, if you want anything, if you just need to connect with us just to like vent about something that's going on, we're totally here for you. You have the list of people from the leadership team, you have the equity specialists, you have instructional coaches, you have a really rich group of people who work on these plans to get you guys like all set. And if there's something we have not talked about that you want more information about, reach out to one of us. We'll work with you individually. So can the leadership team just unmute? So thank you guys. And if you have anything you'd like to share with the group, this is your opportunity. Other than that, we're going to let everybody go. Did anybody have anything? No?
Nope, just thanks, and we're here. Reach out.
Yeah. Okay, so we will be sending along the slideshow presentation. Thanks to Leilani, the recording, and also all of the comments will be in a script on the side added on for you too.
I don't know, Jeff, if you're seeing that people are asking for access to the link that you just sent. It looks like a great resource if you can try sharing it again.
There's a wasp.
Sorry to
in
hear
your
about the
basement.
wasp in your basement.
Oh, no.
They're pretty calm this time of year if you can collect them with a yogurt cup or something like that and a piece of paper. Just saying.